Good evening. How's everyone doing tonight, all right? Really? All right. I'm just assuming because it's all the smoke, you're all caught up in a fog right now and stuff like that. It's almost like heaven back there, Father Dan, right? The other night, I was so blessed to have Mike McDuffie and Nick leading us in worship tonight, and I was over at Mike's house the other night. Mike's getting married. Mike's engaged. He's getting married in October. Sorry, ladies. Sorry. But no, Mike's engaged. He's getting married in October. Isn't that awesome? And so I was over at his house for dinner, his family's house, for dinner with Alexis's family. And it was wonderful to talk about the wedding and everything like that. I met with them afterwards in the planning of the ceremony. I'm privileged to be able to celebrate their wedding. So that's when I popped the big question to Mike that night as well. And I said, Mike, we are in desperately need of a musician for Friday night in the North End. Would you please help us? And he said, well, sure, I can be happy to help you. He's like, what's the readings? I'm like, I don't know. He's like, hold on a second. He looked up on his phone, and it was this very small reading of the women accompanying Jesus, and he's like, okay. And I'm like, okay, great, we'll work it. We'll make it work. Sounds good. And I was reflecting on this reading, and I'm grateful for that moment, because I was thinking of a time when it brought up a memory of a time of being with a dear priest friend of mine. And we were talking about blessing. And he had said to me, I was a seminarian, and he said, Matthew, you're a blessing to me. And it got me thinking for a second, like, well, no, Father, like, how's that possible? Like, because this summer, I was assigned to for the whole summer, and this summer we went everywhere. All kinds of, when I say we're ministerially, from communion calls and nursing homes and the hospital and praying with people, serving Mass after Mass, healing services, preaching, being able to be part of his ministry in so many ways, and going on pilgrimage with him. It was such a blessing. It was crazy. It's awesome. It was one of the most formative experiences of my seminary life. And I was so blessed. I felt like I was just privileged to carry his bags, and so privileged to be with him. And I just felt like I was the one getting all the blessing. And he says, Matthew, you are a blessing to me. I'm like, no, that can't be, Father. He's like, oh no, you are a tremendous blessing to me. I'm saying, well, I'm kind of like a sidekick. What kind of a blessing is that? And he says, Matthew, he says, Jesus was blessed by his friends as well. He was blessed by his relationship with the apostles and those who followed him and accompanied him. And I was like, wow, you're right. He says it didn't just go one way. Certainly Jesus is the Lord, and he didn't need them to fulfill anything in him. Jesus is the Lord. However, Jesus was blessed by their companionship, by their friendship. So when you hear the gospel today, as Jesus is about his mission, going from town to town, preaching the gospel, he's accompanied by the 12 and some women. And it's kind of interesting, some of the people that follow Jesus, as it tells us that these women had been cured of evil spirits and infirmities. They must have had quite a reputation, if you ask me. The fact that they put that in the author's note there, St. Luke puts in there, they must have had a little bit of a reputation. So clearly the people that followed Jesus represented all kinds of people. There was no one that Jesus wouldn't allow to be with him. Certainly there was somebody called. And Mary Magdalene, and whom 7 demons had gone out, and Joanna, the wife of Herod, steward, Chuza, Susanna, and many others. And here's the line, who provided for them out of their resources. So they accompanied Jesus and they provided for him out of their resources. Jesus was blessed. Do you realize, brothers and sisters, do you realize that you can be a blessing to Jesus now? Do you realize that? Do you realize that you can bless Jesus by your life? And St. Paul, in his letter to Timothy, lays out for us in this 6th chapter. We're coming to the end of his letter to Timothy here. He lays out for us some very simple virtues that we can follow to be a blessing to Jesus. He says, "But you, man of God, avoid all this. Instead, pursue righteousness, devotion, faith, love, patience, and gentleness. Compete well for the faith." Righteousness, devotion, righteousness, holiness, saintliness, devotion, your religious practices, being faithful to your spiritual disciplines. The most beautiful thing about these women and these people who accompany Jesus, their greatest blessing is that they love Jesus. They loved him. They loved to be with him. Jesus delights when you and I make time for him, when we love on him, if you will, by our prayer. We always want to be quick to be about doing things for God before being with God first. There's a primacy of being with him over doing. We have to be about doing things, don't get me wrong. And that'll be the second part of the homily. But the first part is that we have to be about God's business, being at his feet in prayer, in adoration, with the rosary, with scripture. We need to pray and be with God. When we make that time to love him in prayer, in heartfelt prayer, we bless him, and he delights in that. The saints, we study the lives of the saints. The saints are so important. Why? They keep us from being mediocre in our Christianity. Saints keep you and I from being mediocre Christians in this world. Saint Cyprian and Saint Cornelius, who were persecuted for the sake of the name of Jesus. Remember, Christianity was outlawed in the first 3 centuries, and they were willing to die. We know that Cyprian was martyred, exiled and martyred. We know that Cornelius suffered exile and was greatly persecuted. They were willing to suffer for the name. Why? Because they encountered him, and they continue to encounter him in prayer. They sought holiness, righteousness, devotion, and faith. And then the second part of that is the overflow, is the way that we love each other. Do you realize that when you love and serve each other, do I realize that we are loving and serving Christ? Remember when St. Paul had his conversion on the Damascus Way, and he was struck down, and a voice came from the heavens and said to Saul, "Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me? Why do you persecute me?" And he asked, "Who are you, sir, that I may know who I'm persecuting?" And what was his response? "I am Jesus, whom you are persecuting." Now, if you read the first part of Acts, you realize he was persecuting Christians, people who believed in Jesus. And Jesus says, "You are persecuting me." He's teaching us a profound lesson of how he identifies with his people. When I was hungry, you gave me food. When I was thirsty, you gave me to drink. When I was naked, you clothed me. How God identifies himself with our brothers and sisters. When we love each other, when we love for the name of Christ and for the sake of Christ, we bless Jesus. I want to share with you the story of this. I came across this saint very recently. His name is Saint Raymond Nonnatus. I'm probably saying it correctly. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly or not. But Saint Raymond Nonnatus was a saint who lived in the Middle Ages. And he joined an order known as the Mercedarians. Okay? Mercedarians. And they were an order that was dedicated to something that you don't hear about too often these days. They were an order that was dedicated to ransoming Christians, Christian prisoners, and slaves from Muslims. This is during the Middle Ages, when there were religious wars. And this gentleman, Saint Raymond Nonnatus, came from a noble family. And this family resisted his vocation, but he persevered and he eventually entered the novitiate. And after years of formation, he was sent to North Africa to negotiate the release of a good number of Christian slaves. but his money ran out. And before he could ransom a few miserable prisoners who were losing their faith as a result of their horrendous sufferings, Raymond offered to substitute himself as a pledge for their future ransom. He was willing to substitute himself for them. So they were set free, and Raymond took their place. And he was treated mildly at first, but then there was a problem because he started converting his guards. He started converting them to Jesus. And so they punished him more severely, and they forbade him from speaking about Jesus to anyone. But he couldn't hold back. When that love burns in you, you don't want to hold back, I'll tell you. When you're in love, you want to tell everyone about who you're in love with. It affects the way you wake up in the morning. It affects the way you go to bed at night. It affects everything you do throughout the day when you're in love. When you're in love with Jesus and you encounter that love, it affects everything of who you are and what you do. And all you want to do is bear witness to that love when it's burning in you. And so he couldn't hold back. And so more and more conversions happened. And at that point, the governor wanted to kill him. But those awaiting the ransom had a better idea. They had, you ready for this? Are you ready for this? Talk about the extremes of love for Christ. They had St. Raymond's lips pierced with a hot iron. Maybe you're thinking about that for me right now. I don't know. That's all right. Hot iron. And they had it chained shut with a padlock to keep him from spreading the gospel. The governor himself kept the key, and the lock was opened only once a day so that he could eat. He was thrown into a dungeon for 8 months, where he languished physically, but he thrived spiritually. Finally, the ransom arrived, and Raymond was set free. Upon returning to Spain, his fame spread like wildfire, and the Pope named him a cardinal and called him to Rome. On the way to Rome, he caught a fever and died at the age of 36. What love! What love! The burning of Jesus' love in his heart. He couldn't keep his mouth quiet, except he had to literally lock it shut for the sake of the name of Jesus. When we are willing to go to such measures in love, we bless Jesus. Now, certainly you don't have to do something to the point where they're going to have to zip your mouth shut literally. But the saints thought in a completely different way than you and I think. They don't think mediocrity. They think heaven. They think Jesus and that cross that he was nailed to. In the words that Jesus says that no greater love has man or woman than this, than to lay down your life for your friends. This week we celebrated the feast of the exaltation of the Holy Cross. We saw love. We reflected on the reality of God's love. It beckons us to be quiet and to reflect upon what Jesus went through for you and I. What are you and I worth? We're worth the precious blood of Jesus. We're worth the precious blood of Jesus. Mother Teresa of Calcutta addressed at National Prayer Breakfast in Washington, D.C. in 1994. And she told this to all who would listen, the political leaders in the United States. She said, "It's not for us to say, I love God, but also I have to say, I love my neighbor." Mother Teresa says, St. John says that you're a liar if you say you love God and you don't love your neighbor. How can you love God whom you do not see if you do not love your neighbor whom you do see, whom you touch, with whom you live? Mother Teresa goes on, it is also very important for us to realize that love, to be true, has to hurt. I must be willing to give whatever it takes not to harm other people, and in fact, to do good to them. This requires that I be willing to give until it hurts. Otherwise, there is no true room, there is no true love in me, and I bring injustice, not peace, to those around me. Think of those words. I'd be willing to give until it hurts. Brothers and sisters, we are called to be a blessing to Jesus. And you are a blessing. God delights in you being here tonight. He loves you dearly. But for us to realize as we go forward from here and as you seek to live the gospel and follow Christ in the workplace and into next week and seek to go into this weekend, to remember the example of the saints that they put before us and their steadfast love, fueled by a prayer life, not a 3 times a week prayer life or a, 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there, but they devoted time every day in prayer. I often joke that people say, well, I pray when I get in my car. I'm like, that's great, but what happens like with your eyes closed? How do you keep from hitting the car in front of you? Well, you've got to close your eyes when you pray, unless you're meditating on the Blessed Sacrament. How can we go in if we're so distracted by everything around us? Love beckons us to quiet, intimate prayer. How do we bless Jesus? There are so many ways you can bless Jesus. First, by taking time to pray every day, blessing Him. And you are a blessing, a consolation when you come to Him in prayer. And then secondly, by loving each other, by serving each other, by serving Christ in each other, we bless Jesus just like His companions in today's gospel.